to the One Star Cowboys podcast postgame edition. Cowboys lose 34-17 to the Chargers. We'll hear from Father John Machota here in a little bit. I'm Kevin Turner with Saad Youssef and Kent Garrison. Saad, pretty good offense in the first half. Not a lot of defense in the first half or the whole game, really. Got a couple stops in the second half. Not a lot to write home about here, though, dude.
No, not at all. And I think at this point for the rest of the season, a lot of our podcasts and everything is going to be a little bit more bigger picture anyways, because the games obviously don't matter. But just to talk about the game right now, though, the Chargers, remember I was doing that bit earlier in the year where every game the opposing offense does something that they haven't done all season, or it's a rare thing. Well, we're back with that as the Chargers totaled 452 yards of offense, which is the highest total of their season. The previous high was 445 against the Colts. So they were able to top that. So that was the best output of the season for the Chargers offense, which is pretty wild when you consider Herbert is kind of limited with his injury and, they're banged up on the offensive line, all the stuff. But I mean, to be quite honest with you, it's not something that you can really be super furious about it, in my opinion. Like, what do you expect when you don't have Quinnen Williams in this game either? Trayvon Diggs came back, but I'm not sure if that's really a plus or a minus, which, he was like, whatever. But yeah, so I think in general, you're right. The defense was not good, but it was pretty uninspiring. An uninspiring performance all around by the Cowboys, I would say. The offense was like you said, good in the first half, but then fell off a cliff in the second half. So not much.
Yeah, and a lot of talking. Like Eberflus is moving up to the booth and all that stuff. Like, I don't know if that's going to matter, especially like you said, Quinnen Williams not there, overshown, out with the concussion. In the first half. It's just what you said about Trayvon too. I mean, Trayvon to me, I will say I didn't think much of him out because I was trying to watch him a little closely at the beginning of the game until the Ladd McConkey touchdown, where Trayvon was either confused about the coverage or he just saw it late because McConkey was coming in motion and ran the wheel route and they went past him. And at one point, Trayvon kind of quit running. And it's just another classic thing we've seen over the last 2 years with him, with like just kind of hands up, like what happened there? Like, did he not know? Was that his responsibility? I don't know. I don't know what their coverage call was. But he definitely saw it late, and then when it was time to turn and run with McConkey, he quit running at some point, and easy touchdown, and it's like, oh, well, there's Trayvon Diggs on my radar there. So,
yeah, there was another play. There was another play in the second half where a Chargers wide receiver, I don't remember which one, but he was coming from the far right, or from the right side of the formation, right side of the play, and just, I think it was on third down, ran a cross route all the way to the left sideline, and Trayvon was underneath the play, and it's one of those plays that I think 2-3 years ago, like if that ball's in the air, I'm expecting Trayvon Diggs is going to undercut it, pick it off, and maybe return it for a touchdown or something. But it was just an easy completion on that play. I don't know if you know which one I'm talking about, but
yeah, no,
it was not good.
I do. I think that ended up being Johnston, I think.
Okay.
Who had a big day back for them. I mean, look, if you played for the Chargers, you probably had a big day when it comes to catching the ball. I mean, Keenan Allen, there's a one time too, it was a 3rd and 7. Now it sounds like we're picking on Trayvon Diggs, but it was a 3rd and 7 and a little slant route right there where it's like, dude, if you would just clamp down on that a little bit, then it's 4th and 1, or you got a chance to break up the pass. It just, like you said, I think uninspired, I think's a good word. I think another game that won't bode well for the future of Matt Eberflus here. Although I think there is, I still think, Jerry and Steven would prefer to go into next year with him, but I think their hands are going to be tied here. I don't think there's any way they can do it.
Yeah, I think coming out of this game, a few things that, if I'm really talking about where I stand on the Cowboys' future after this game, Trayvon Diggs a few times kind of went out, looked like he got banged up and hurt. You just can't afford that if you're the Cowboys right now. Like, you cannot afford Trayvon to get hurt, and obviously they plan to cut him in the offseason, and you can't have any wrenches thrown into that plan if he's dealing with an injury, and you have to you're unable to do what you need to do in the offseason. That's the most important thing right now. And then the other thing for me is there are three players that I don't think should see the field again this year, and that's Dak, CeeDee Lamb, and Quinnen Williams. Those
Yeah.
three guys for me, I'm not one of those guys like, you can't be unrealistic. This isn't college football. You don't have 110 people on the roster. You can't sit everyone. But Dak, Quinnen Williams, who missed today's game, and CD, those three guys are vital parts of your plans for 2026. You just can't have it right now, to where either one of them, gets hurt. Any of them gets hurt in a, Patrick Mahomes like fashion or anything like that. You can't afford it. So I know Brian Schottenheimer was, kind of brushed it off when he was asked about it earlier in the week, because the Cowboys technically, I guess, weren't, fully eliminated, whatever. But at this point, you have 2 games left. I do think that you need to give Joe Milton a look and see what you have there. And to be honest, I hate to even frame it that way, because I really don't care who the backup is. I really don't
Yeah.
care if you want to see Joe Milton or Will Grier. It doesn't matter. The main objective is to make sure nothing happens to Dak. And so that's the most important thing.
Yeah, no, I think once you get into that window of an injury could put into question if you're able to come back at the beginning of next season, that's where it's an easy call. I mean, and like you said, the Joe Burrow thing against Cincinnati, Joe Burrow's putting pressure on their front office to make decisions and things like that, and he's trying to show that he's unhappy. He's gonna play. I don't think he should be playing either. Like, any of these big name quarterbacks who are really good and it's over should not be playing. It's just, and it's not. And the NFL is like, well, the quality of the league needs to look good and all that stuff, and they want to hear that. But like, this is just simple. Like, okay, what matters now? Well, if you're out of the playoffs this year and making a run this year, what matters now is letting young guys play, trying to develop them. And like, for instance, a guy who I think we would call a franchise type player, a guy who will be here, is Tyler Smith. Letting him play at left tackle, yeah, that is evaluating things for next year. And that might have been a move that was made out of necessity for him to play some left tackle today, because of, Guyton's been hurt and Nate Thomas is banged up. Let me ask you that. Is that a move out of necessity, or is that something you think they're evaluating for next year?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I think that's something that, we probably have to chat with John about. I think that would be a more fair evaluation of that move. But he looked good, man, and that's not a surprise. Obviously, it's not something that we come back and we're like, "Holy crap, Tyler Smith can play left tackle." We've known this. So yeah, I do think it's something that the Cowboys are going to have to look at. It's something we've talked about for the last 3 years. So not terribly surprising on that front. I kind of also have said this maybe off the air or something to you, but in today's NFL, for the teams that do get eliminated with a game or 2 or 3 left in the season, this is your best version of preseason. The preseason is a bunch of nobodies against a bunch of nobodies. If you're actually trying to get good evaluations for your future, this is the time to do it. Not every team is going to have the opportunity, quote unquote, to do it, because obviously there are teams that are getting ready for the playoffs. But if you do, this is when you actually are getting your players against actual NFL talent, even if the other team is playing backups, even if you're playing the Chiefs right now. But they're still playing players who are supposed to be on NFL rosters, unlike the preseason when you're playing, guy number 77 or guy number 85. These are all top 53 guys, and I think this is why it's an opportunity for the Cowboys to actually see how some of these guys do measure up.
Yeah, and I think that's where you look at like Logan Wilson, a guy you traded for. Okay, where is he in here? Because Kenneth Murray, can't be back next year. Like, the guys in the secondaries are tough. Like, you want to see Ravel, I guess, and if Carson can get back, or I guess Carson will probably be done, right? So, like, it's still a lot of evaluating, and there's other questions for me, like Jadeveon Clowney absolutely wants to be a free agent, so like he's going to go do that and just sign this thing. Like, who's going to rush the passer for us next year? Those are things that and these are all off-season conversations we're going to be having. Like, how do you spend your draft picks, and what are you really looking for to fill these holes? Because you kind of know what it is at this point. Outside of a few players who you're looking for more answers on what they are, you know what it is. We need to know a little more about Shamar James, but man, that's not exciting. So we don't need to know much more about Javonte Williams or Malik Davis, in my opinion, if you were to take it to that side of the ball. I think what you said about CeeDee Lamb's interesting, because I could use a couple more games of George Pickens being the focal point and to see how he handles that. We've got a lot of evidence on that this year, but I think a couple more games of that could be good.
Yeah, and honestly, a little trickle down on that wide receiver depth chart. I know he got hurt and didn't return, but I would like to see a little bit more Ryan Flanoy.
Yeah.
He's kind of shown flashes to be a pretty good wide receiver 3. What about him in a wide receiver 2 role next to George Pickens? The thing with Lamb is he's dealt with injuries this year. He's been a little banged up. He kind of hit the milestone, of getting another 1,000-yard season. I just don't know how much more you're going to get. I don't really have a huge problem because the way that he plays doesn't really lend to getting injured too much. He doesn't play like, that kind of he doesn't play in the trenches. He's not taking big hits. So I don't really mind him playing, but I don't really know how much more I'm going to learn from CD being out there. But yeah, no, I'm with you on the Pickens thing. I think I would like to see a little bit more Pickens and how he's able to operate without CD.
Yeah, and with Joe Milton too, like that puts you in like an uncomfortable situation, and seeing how he would handle that would be interesting. Although I don't know, you watched that NFC East Hard Knocks the other day when they're having the behind the closed doors meetings about George Pickens. It does seem like Jerry really likes him, so it does feel like that money's going there. It's a defense problem right now. Like, this is the inability to get off the field. The length of these drives, Saad, just unbelievable. Like, when you just look all through the entire game for the Chargers, they had, if I'm looking at this right, 6-play drive, 65 yards, 7 plays for 87 yards, and then a 16-play drive. I think they had another 14-play drive, and the Cowboys were able to match that a couple times. The Cowboys had a 16-play drive. They had a 10-play scoring drive. Like, they were able to match some of that stuff and keep it close for a game. But with this defense, this is without Quinnen Williams. You kind of see like, oh, this is the first half of the season defense. And that's when we were talking about them winning 6 games this year.
Yeah.
That's where they stand at 6-8-1. So this is why it's a bummer too for us when they're out of it. Like, we know our fans are bummed out and stuff, but when they're out of it, we're sitting here talking about things going, well, that sucked. When does the season end? Can we move forward?
And it sucks even more because you're not talking about, hockey or basketball where, there's 82 of these things. There's in the whole year, in a whole calendar year, you only get 17 of these. And yet, you still, when you get cut short by that sucks.
Yeah. Well, we'll catch up a little bit later in the week. We'll do our midweek podcast as usual, even though it is the holiday season. We'll do it from the Haymaker Network studios, and we'll get together and look each other in the eyes and talk about things and have a little fun, hopefully, as well. And then because Christmas Day, the Netflix game, is going to be a nooner on Thursday, Christmas Day, Dallas against Washington. So we'll get our thoughts from Jon Machota, and then we will get back together a little bit later in the week. Saad, thank you for your time, and we'll talk to you a little bit later. Let's send it out to Father Jon Machota for his thoughts on a wild day at AT&T Stadium. Goodbye, everyone.
All right, leaving the stadium. Another Cowboys loss. Another poor performance by the defense. 3 possessions in the first half for the Chargers, 3 touchdowns. That's not great. Some defensive improvement in the second half, and then that's exactly when the offense decided not to do anything. So not a great way to end the home game stretch for the Dallas Cowboys. Like we've talked about on previous shows, I think it just becomes more and more clear by the game that whether it's Matt Eberflus on the sideline or up in the coaching boxes, That's not the answer. And Jerry talked after the game for quite a while, and obviously Matt Eberflus and coaching changes were a popular topic, and how much Jerry was answering those questions certainly makes it seem like he's ready to go in that direction. I've just been around Jerry enough to know when he's not really thinking that way, he'll kind of shoot some stuff down and won't go into great depth. And he was going on about the idea of what potential candidates could be out there and things of that nature. So I think the one thing from this game that probably stands out most on that side of it is I believe Justin Herbert came in to this game being sacked 49 times, which was tied for the most in the NFL this season. And he was not sacked once by the Dallas Cowboys. And I think that that's been one of, and you could argue the biggest issue is the lack of pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And that certainly was the case again today. That's not to absolve the back end. They certainly haven't been great either, but the lack of pressure is pretty stunning. Not having Quentin Williams out there obviously hurts, but again, I'm not asking them to get 5-6 sacks on Justin Herbert, but you should get a couple. And they're just not getting home. And then even when they bring blitzes, they're not getting home. And so it's not a great look for the defensive coaching staff. And so that was my big takeaway, just like it has been the last two games, is that the defense needs some changes. And I don't get the sense that Jerry thinks that it's all the personnel. And I don't think it's all the personnel either. I think there's some decent pieces on defense that you got to add some other things. Don't get me wrong. You're not just going to run this back with a new defensive coordinator, but I think that there are some pieces there, certainly starting with Quentin Williams and then having 2 first-round picks where you could upgrade the defense with the right coordinator. And I certainly think that that coordinator needs to be someone who is more aggressive. And if that means giving up some big plays, then so be it. But just sitting back, that has just not been the recipe for this team. And I just think that the offense is too good and should be good again next year, should be one of the best offenses in the league. That the defense just needs to be middle of the pack. It doesn't need to be the best defense. It doesn't need to be a top 5 defense. Probably doesn't even need to be a top 10 defense. Just be somewhere in the middle of the pack. You'll probably be fine. You're probably going to the playoffs this year if that would have been the case. And it's not. And the Cowboys aren't going to the playoffs. And they're not going to the playoffs for the second consecutive year. They're not going to the playoffs for the 4th time in the last 7 years. And so that's not great. And yeah, so I really don't have a ton of interest in breaking down the game because we've seen it too many times this year. But for me, it came down to you can't get any stops in the first half. It looked like Justin Herbert and that Chargers offense was just basically playing with the Cowboys defense that we'll run off as much clock as we want and we'll take as much time as we want because we know we'll just get down there and score eventually. And they did that very well. And I think it's important to note that that's without Rashawn Slater. That's without Joe Alt, their stud offensive tackles. Now, they haven't had Slater all season. But you take that team and you put out Slater and Alt, that's a way different story. I mean, the offensive line they were playing with today, with all the injuries that they have, that's not an offensive line that should keep Justin Herbert completely clean. And I think he was hit maybe 4 or 5 times, but for the most part, pretty clean in the pocket. And that's not great. And so I think that was the biggest one defensively. Offensively, I just couldn't believe that they couldn't get anything going in the second half with how good everything looked in the first half. And so certainly something that there's been an issues throughout this season where the offense is sputtered and it leaves you scratching your head. And there would have been so many games this year where I would have talked about that. And that would have been one of my biggest takeaways from the game if they were losing some close games where the defense was shown up. But the defense has just been so bad for such a big chunk of this season, really all but maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 games at the most. Has it been okay? But it's been so bad all season that it's so hard to look past that and really put a ton of blame on the offense. Now, improve the defense in the offseason, make a coordinator change, and then maybe if the offense is coming up short, maybe that'll be a different story next year. But I really feel like a second year under Brian Schottenheimer, coming off this season that Dak had, you could make the argument that it's his best season with how well he's played. I don't see George Pickens going anywhere. So you bring him back and then you pair him with CeeDee Lamb. And I think that I think there's a decent chance to get Javonte Williams back. And if they don't, I think they will invest in running back more so than maybe they have in previous seasons. And so I think that could be a strong point again. I think the offensive line's interesting with seeing today Tyler Smith play left tackle. I think that could potentially be his spot going forward. Maybe that means Tyler Guyton moves to right tackle. But it sounds like Tyler Smith will have that left tackle spot for at least the rest of this season, and then they go in the offseason and figure out what they need to do. If they leave Tyler Smith at left tackle, and that's the plan going in the offseason, that screams to me that they really just don't want to use another first-round pick on an offensive lineman, that they want to try and figure that out in other ways. And I can't blame them. I think both those first-round picks, if they use both of them and don't trade back, they should be addressing the defense. If they use one and then trade back, heck, and you get 2 other picks, maybe all 3 of those picks should be defensive players. But I think the offense will be fine. I do think that there are pieces on this team that if you make the right moves on defense, this can be a playoff team next year. Go to the Super Bowl? I might be asking a lot. The drought officially got to, it's at 30 years now, so it's pretty tough to sit there and predict that, yes, they will be going to the Super Bowl. But I think they can be a playoff team next year. But hey, there's still 2 more games to go. Exciting times. 2 more road games. Go to Washington on Christmas, and then finish it out in New York against the Giants. So final home game from AT&T Stadium. Pretty disappointing, 34-17. And the Cowboys will not have a winning season at best. They can be middle of the pack. And that's not great. That's not what was expected. And it's pretty clear that some adjustments need to be made in the offseason.
I don't have time to have a bad time. It ain't on my schedule.